Imagine for a moment that you are flying on a commercial airliner from New York to the Middle East. You lean over, look down through the scratched acrylic of your window, and stretching out beneath you is the Sahara. For the vast majority of us, the Sahara is nothing more than 3.5 million square miles of absolute, unrelenting emptiness. It is a monolithic ocean of dead yellow sand, a place where the midday sun routinely pushes the temperature past 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and massive shifting dunes stretch endlessly toward a blurry, heat-warped horizon. To put its sheer, terrifying scale into perspective, the Sahara Desert is roughly the same size as the entire continental United States, from California to Maine, covered entirely in dust. It seems like a place completely devoid of a past, a present, or a future. But what if I told you that this desolate landscape is actually the greatest geological illusion on the planet? Beneath those endless layers of scorching sand hides a completely different world. Buried in the dark are the ghosts of colossal, roaring rivers. There are the skeletal remains of highly advanced, forgotten human empires. And deeper still, there are the fossilized bones of unimaginable marine leviathans that ruled this earth long before a human foot ever touched the ground. The Sahara is not dead. It is simply paused. It is hidden. And the discoveries scientists are unearthing from its depths right now are forcing us to completely rewrite the history of our planet. Let's begin with a mystery so massive that you physically cannot see it while standing on the ground. In 1965, NASA astronauts James McDivitt and Ed White were orbiting the Earth in the Gemini 4 spacecraft. As they floated over the desolate expanse of Mauritania, they looked down and saw something that defied all logic. Staring right back at them from the center of a monotonous, flat desert plateau was a gigantic, unblinking eye. From orbit, it looked as if a celestial being had taken a massive compass and carved perfect, concentric rings straight into the bedrock of the Earth. This anomaly is known as the Richat structure, or the Eye of the Sahara, and it measures a staggering 25 miles across. The most surreal part? If you were to walk across this territory on foot, you wouldn't even realize you were inside a massive geometric formation. You would just think you were hiking over a series of confusing circular hills. When the Gemini 4 photographs were released to the public, the world's imagination ran wild. Historians and amateur archaeologists immediately pointed to the ancient texts of Plato. In his legendary dialogues, the lost capital city of Atlantis was described exactly like this: alternating rings of land and water. The size, the shape, the layout. For many, this was the ultimate smoking gun proof. The internet exploded with theories that the Eye of the Sahara was the ruin of a highly advanced ancient civilization, or perhaps the blast crater from an unfathomably powerful prehistoric weapon. But when geologists finally trekked into the center of the eye with their rock hammers, the truth they uncovered was even more breathtaking than the myth of Atlantis. The Eye of the Sahara is not a lost city, and it is not a meteor crater. It is a masterpiece of deep time. Millions of years ago, a colossal plume of superheated magma began rising from deep within the Earth's mantle. It pushed aggressively upward against the crust, warping it into a massive blister-like dome. But the volcano never erupted. The magma eventually cooled and hardened deep underground. Then, over the course of millions of years, the relentless forces of nature took over. Howling winds, ancient rushing waters, and violent temperature swings slowly sanded down the top of this geological blister. The softer rock eroded away quickly, while the harder rock remained standing, forming the perfectly concentric rings we see from space today. But if the Eye of the Sahara is a trick of wind and stone, our next discovery utterly shatters our understanding of geography. To comprehend it, we have to travel to Egypt, roughly 100 miles southwest of Cairo, to a place known as Wadi al-Hitan. If you stand there today, the heat is suffocating, often reaching 115 degrees. There is no shade, no water, just baked earth and a wind that howls through the canyons. You walk across this dead, cracked landscape, and suddenly, your boot kicks a strange, smooth rock protruding from the dust. You kneel down to brush away the sand, and you realize it's not a rock. It is a vertebra, and it's as thick as a tree trunk. You follow the trail of bone, and you uncover a massive, elongated skull armed with jaws full of serrated, razor-sharp teeth. You are looking at a whale, a genuine, massive, prehistoric marine leviathan, and it is not alone. This entire desert valley is a massive graveyard littered with the skeletons of hundreds of giant marine monsters resting miles away from the nearest drop of ocean water. When paleontologists began carefully excavating these remains, they noticed a detail that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. These whales, a species known as Basilosaurus, had legs. They possessed tiny but fully formed hind legs with distinct toes. These were not the gentle plankton-filtering giants we know today. These were 60-foot-long apex-killing machines, the absolute rulers of the oceans 40 million years ago. Inside their fossilized stomachs, scientists have found the mangled remains of ancient sharks and massive sea turtles. But how does a pod of 60-foot killer whales end up stranded in the driest desert on Earth? The answer is that 40 million years ago, the map of the world looked completely different. Where the Sahara now burns, the ancient Tethys Ocean once thrived. Picture a vibrant tropical paradise, shallow, crystal-clear, sun-warmed lagoons bordered by dense mangrove forests. The Basilosaurus would migrate to these quiet, protected African bays to give birth and raise their young. But the Earth's crust is never still. Slowly, the massive African tectonic plate drifted northward, violently colliding with Eurasia. The immense pressure forced the Earth's floor to buckle and rise. The water slowly drained away. The vibrant tropical lagoons turned into stagnant swamps. The swamps dried into toxic salt flats, and eventually, the relentless sand swallowed it all, perfectly entombing the whales where they swam. When you walk through Wadi al-Hitan today, you are not walking in a desert. You are hiking across the bottom of a 40-million-year-old ocean.
Yet, the Sahara doesn't just hold the bones of monsters. It holds the lost memories of our own ancestors. Let's move to the heart of Algeria, to the Tassili Niger Plateau. It is a maddening labyrinth of sandstone towers, deep slot canyons, and bizarre rock formations that look like they belong on the surface of Mars. In the 1930s, a patrol of French soldiers, desperate to escape the lethal midday sun, took shelter in one of these deep canyons. As their eyes adjusted to the shadows, they looked up at the cave walls and froze. The rock was completely covered in thousands of incredibly detailed, vibrant paintings. But they weren't painting the desert. The artists depicted a world that simply does not exist anymore. There were sprawling scenes of humans herding massive flocks of spotted cattle. There were hunters chasing down giraffes, rhinos, and hippopotamuses, massive animals that require thousands of gallons of fresh water a day just to survive. But the most jarring images were the boats. The artists had carefully drawn large, woven reed boats filled with men navigating deep, wide rivers. How could anyone paint a bustling river fleet in a place where rain hasn't fallen in decades? Climatologists have since uncovered the truth. Roughly 6,000 to 10,000 years ago, the Sahara was entirely green. It was a period known as the African Humid Period. The Earth's orbital axis was tilted just slightly differently, pulling the heavy monsoon rains far to the north. At the center of this lush, vibrant savanna sat Lake Megachad, an inland sea that was larger than all of the North American Great Lakes combined. But the climate is incredibly fragile. As the Earth's wobble shifted back, the monsoons failed. The lakes rapidly evaporated into cracked mud. The savanna grasses turned to dust, and the massive herds of animals perished or fled. The rock art of Tassili Najer documents this apocalypse in real time. The joyful paintings of dancing and abundant harvests are suddenly replaced by dark, violent scenes of warfare, spears, and bloodshed. The people were fighting to the death over the last remaining watering holes. Those who survived this slow-motion catastrophe had to pack up their lives and walk east, desperately following the receding water until they reached the only river that refused to dry up, the Nile. Many modern historians now believe that this massive wave of desperate climate refugees fleeing the dying, drying Sahara provided the exact spark of population density and shared trauma that ignited the glorious civilization of ancient Egypt. Their mythology of a lost paradise might not just be a religious concept, it might be a literal genetic memory of green Sahara. For a long time, arrogant modern historians assumed that once the Sahara turned to sand, it became a wasteland inhabited only by sparse nomadic tribes. But recently, ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery have utterly destroyed that assumption. Buried beneath the dunes of southwestern Libya, archaeologists discovered the geometric outlines of a forgotten empire. They found the foundations of over 100 heavily fortified cities, complete with perfectly straight streets, defensive walls, and towering strongholds. This was the Garamantian Empire. During the height of the Roman Empire, while much of Europe was still living in primitive wooden huts, the Garamantes were building two-story stone villas in the middle of a barren desert. They had a written language, advanced metallurgy, and a terrifying military force of horse-drawn chariots.
But their true genius, the absolute secret to their survival in hell, was water engineering. The Garamantes realized there was water trapped deep beneath the desert floor. They built an astonishing network of underground tunnels known as fagaras, or qanats. Using nothing but hand tools, slaves, and brilliant mathematics, they carved hundreds of miles of subterranean aqueducts to tap into ancient, deep aquifers, allowing the water to flow purely by gravity into the valleys below. In the middle of an absolute wasteland, they created lush, sprawling oasis cities filled with wheat, grapes, date palms, and fig trees. But the Garamantes made a fatal miscalculation, one that serves as a chilling warning for us today. The water they were tapping into was fossil water. It was left over from the green Sahara thousands of years prior. It was not being replenished by rain. As their empire grew in wealth and population, their thirst grew with it. They had to dig their tunnels deeper, wider, and longer. Eventually, the math caught up with them. The ancient reservoirs ran dry. The oasis crops withered and died. The cities starved, and the desert quietly swallowed their magnificent stone towers. It is a story that feels terrifyingly familiar when we look at places like the Ogallala Aquifer in the American Midwest today, which is currently being drained for agriculture at a vastly unsustainable rate. But the fall of an empire is a slow tragedy. The Sahara also hides evidence of an apocalypse that happened in a fraction of a second.
Buried beneath the
British
dunes of
archaeologist
southwestern
Howard
Libya,
Carter
archaeologists
famously
discovered the
breached the
geometric
sealed tomb of the boy
outlines
king
of a forgotten
Tutankhamun in
empire.
1922. The world was mesmerized by the gold. But among the priceless treasures draped over the mummy was a breathtaking pectoral necklace featuring a beautifully carved scarab beetle, the Egyptian symbol of rebirth and the sun. For decades, experts assumed the translucent yellow stone in the center was a rare form of quartz. But modern chemical analysis revealed a mind-bending truth. It wasn't quartz, it was Libyan desert glass. This is an almost perfectly transparent lemon-yellow glass that can only be found scattered across hundreds of square miles in one of the most remote, inaccessible parts of the deep Sahara. Here's the problem. To fuse ordinary desert sand into glass of this extreme purity, you have to subject it to temperatures exceeding 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit, and you have to do it almost instantly. No forest fire, no campfire, and no earthly volcano can generate that kind of localized catastrophic heat. So what happened? If it was a meteor strike, where's the massive crater?
Geologists scoured the desert for decades but found no hole in the earth. The breakthrough came from supercomputers. Physicists ran simulations and discovered a terrifying scenario. Roughly 29 million years ago, a massive asteroid hurtled into the Earth's atmosphere, but it never actually hit the ground. The intense friction of entry caused the rock to superheat and detonate in midair, several miles above the desert floor. This was a cosmic airburst. The explosion was so unfathomably powerful that the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima would look like a sparkler in comparison. A second sun ignited in the sky. A wall of invisible, catastrophic thermal radiation slammed into the desert below. The sand didn't just burn, it instantly liquefied. For a few horrifying seconds, the dunes turned into a roiling, bubbling sea of molten glass. When the environment finally cooled, the desert was littered with these strange yellow shards. Millions of years later, Pharaoh's jewelers picked up a piece of this glass, believing it was the solidified light of the sun god. And in a way, they were right. It was light, just a violent cosmic light from the deep universe.
And yet, despite the asteroids, the dead whales, and the buried empires, the greatest secret of the Sahara is what it hides today. In the mid-20th century, oil prospectors began drilling deep into the Libyan desert. They were hoping to strike black gold. Instead, their drill bits hit something far more valuable. A geyser of freezing, crystal-clear fresh water erupted from the sand. They had accidentally tapped into the Nubian sandstone aquifer system. This isn't just an underground lake, it is a subterranean, prehistoric ocean of fresh water, estimated to hold over 2.5 million cubic kilometers of water. If you were to pump all of this water to the surface, you could submerge the entire states of Texas, California, and Montana under dozens of feet of water. This water is a ghost. It is a relic of the African Humid Period. Some of the water down there has been trapped in the dark rock for hundreds of thousands of years. It is older than human civilization itself. Naturally, humanity decided to exploit it. In Limia, a massive engineering marvel known as the Great Man-Made River was constructed. Colossal concrete pipes, wide enough to drive a truck through, were laid across the burning desert to pump this ancient water to the thirsty coastal cities and create massive circular agricultural farms in the middle of nowhere. It looks like a triumph of human ingenuity. But just like the ancient Garamantes, we are making a deadly gamble. The Nubian Aquifer is a closed vault. It does not rain in the Sahara, meaning this water is not being replenished. Every single gallon pumped out to water a crop or fill a swimming pool is permanently subtracted from a finite, ancient balance. Hydrologists are already watching the water table drop. The drilling has to go deeper, the costs rise, and the risk of salt contamination increases every year. We are building massive modern societies entirely on the credit of a prehistoric climate, and eventually the well will run dry. The Sahara Desert is not an empty, lifeless void. It is the Earth's ultimate silent archive. Beneath its shifting sands lie the shattered ruins of forgotten cities, the dried-up basins of massive oceans, and the bones of creatures that failed to adapt to a changing world. When we look out over those endless monolithic dunes, we shouldn't see emptiness, we should see a mirror. The Sahara reminds us that the stability of our world is nothing but a comfortable illusion. The climate will shift, the oceans will rise and fall, and empires will eventually crumble. And perhaps tens of thousands of years from now, some future explorer will be drilling deep into a new desert, finding strange layers of plastic, steel, and concrete, trying to decipher the mysteries of the lost civilization that once called it home.